Good morning, everybody. My name is Ganesh Sundaresan. I'm a storage solutions architect in the Boston area with Amazon Web Services. Welcome to our workshop today. With me here to help me, Michael Reber. I myself, briefly, a little background on myself. Been in the industry close to 35 years at this point. Worked in a variety of enterprise storage companies before moving to Amazon Web Services about 3.5 years back. Today, I'm mainly working with our customers globally, right here from Boston, to help with their enterprise storage challenges. And Michael, would you introduce yourself briefly?
Thank you, Ganesh. My name is Michael Reiber. I am also a solutions architect storage specialist. I'm coming to you from the Jersey Shore area here, so still in the Northeast. I've also worked with storage for a large number of years and specifically worked with deploying storage solutions in the cloud the last few years. I'm glad to be a part of this and hoping that you enjoy this workshop.
Thank you, Michael. I'm looking forward to doing this with you. So what's the agenda for today? So we have a pretty packed agenda for 90 days. First, we're going to introduce the problem we're trying to solve here. It's something many of our customers deal with on a practically daily basis. The solution we recommend will require using several AWS services. We'll be using AWS DataSync, which is a service for fast and easy migration. We'll be doing AWS Storage Gateway for hybrid cloud storage. And of course, no workshop in storage is complete without some exposure to Amazon Simple Storage Service, that S3 for durable storage. That's going to be the target for our migration today. And a shout out to Jeff Bartley, who has documented the very detailed how-to instructions for this migration workshop in GitHub. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff is also here with us to respond to questions as and when they come up, along with many others from the service team. Please check the chat window for the location of instructions for this workshop. You're welcome to work through this exercise yourself today using your own non-production AWS account, or you can just follow along with me as I demonstrate the major portions of this workshop live. Not sure I can get to all of it. And along the way, I'll also provide a quick overview of the services we're covering, and we'll conclude with key takeaways and more importantly, where you can go for additional learning. If you have questions during the event, you're welcome to post them at any time to chat. Like I said, we have experts who can be responding to you. I've also asked Michael, my co-presenter, to keep watching for some of the more commonly asked questions so he can bubble them up directly to me and I can bring them up to the attention of all of you for everyone's benefit. So what's the problem we're trying to solve here? It's one that, as I mentioned, many of our customers have been dealing with for years and are still dealing with it. Basically, they're trying to reduce their on-premises footprint and move to the cloud, and this is so they can take advantage of benefits such as agility, such as scalability, and cost efficiency. And what we have here in this example of somebody being tied to their on-premises infrastructure is an aging NFS server sitting on-premises. Maybe it's a NAS appliance presenting NFS exports, maybe a NetApp or an EMC VNX or Isilon array that you acquired several years back. Now, and if you go look at the file access patterns on this appliance, you know yourself as an admin or somebody who oversees this, that much of the data hasn't been accessed in years. But if you ask the end users, what do they always tell you? Yeah, I'm using that. Leave it alone. And if they ever lose access to it and you're in charge, you'll probably hear about it right away. So these file shares are also typically running out of capacity, and you're not really looking to purchase more capacity on premises or go through another hardware refresh cycle in your data center. So why not just move these application servers to the cloud and be done with it? Now, in most organizations, the journey to the cloud doesn't happen overnight. Applications move to the cloud on a predefined schedule, and some of them are just not ready to move yet. So that's the problem we're trying to solve here. The solution we're exploring today is very simple. What if we could migrate the existing data from your on-premises NAS to the cloud? And then what if we could present this persistent data in the cloud back to your application servers via NFS or SMB, whatever you're using today? And we want to do this in a very non-disruptive fashion while your NAS is in production. So that's what we're trying to do here. To take a step back and look at the whole portfolio of storage services is probably in order. I'm not sure how much exposure many of you have had to our entire portfolio of storage services, which have been growing and maturing over the years. So in the storage arena, we in AWS first started out with our Amazon S3 or Simple Storage Service offering in 2006. And since then, millions of customers have adopted it for its durability, for its scalability, for its cost effectiveness. You've probably seen the benefits yourself if you used it. And over the years, though, we've added many other services that are storage related, for block storage, for managed file services. We've added services for data transfer, one of which we look at today, whether online or offline. We've added services for hybrid cloud storage, one of which we look at today. And one of our newer offerings around backup with AWS Backup. So we have a variety of services to offer in this space. And today, we can't possibly focus on all of them. So we're going to look at two main services, DataSync for migration and Storage Gateway for hybrid cloud storage. And peripherally, we'll be touching on some of the features of S3 as well. Now, if you're watching this live and you're interested in learning hands-on about the entire portfolio, today's workshop is the second in a series of 6 workshops we are offering through next week. The schedule is always Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, both this week and next week. And these events always start at 8 a.m. Pacific, easy to remember. Please check the chat line for the registration link. Please go ahead and register for the remaining 5 workshops, all offered by colleagues of mine in related services. If you're watching a recorded version of this, look for recordings for the other 5 offerings too. They will be posted right after the events take place. So briefly, this is the overview of this workshop. There's an initial module where we go and deploy the CloudFormation templates. This basically sets up the mock infrastructure for us, where we can go and add in our migration and hybrid cloud storage services. In Module 2, we do an initial migration from your NAS appliance on-premises to the cloud. In Module 3, we present the data back out via file gateway. Not sure we can get to things like incremental copy and cutover, but I will try to do something close ad hoc, right? I'm not sure if time will permit. You, of course, should feel free to go and do these modules in exactly the way they're presented end to end. So with that, without any further ado, let me switch to my console. And first, briefly show you where the instructions are. Again, the chat line is going to have your instructions for you for this workshop. Notice how there's both English and Japanese links. Unfortunately, we don't have it in other languages. I'm going to pick English for myself today. We're going to go work through the first 3 modules or so of this workshop and see what we can do about the others today. So this is what we're trying to do here. Very similar to what I presented in the other picture. We have a, since you don't have a live data center for you to work with, what we've done is set up something close in AWS, which you'll be setting up yourself with your CloudFormation template. One region in which we simulate your data center. We have EC2 instances representing application servers needing NAS storage, NFS storage as well. NFS servers are providing the storage. We'll be putting in some infrastructure in order to bring in these migration and hybrid cloud storage services. And in the other region, we will be using CloudFormation to set up some basic infrastructure to serve as the target for our migration when the DataSync agent comes up and starts writing to it. So with that, let me get started with module 1, which is deployment. And you can go ahead and follow through here with the instructions. And maybe work with me as you go through this, or just watch while I do it. So the very first thing I'm going to do is go set up my data center infrastructure in my first region. And I will be doing this in Ohio because it just happens to be a region close to me. You should feel free to do this in any region you choose. And what I'll be doing is going to CloudFormation and launching one of my templates. And I'll be using a slightly different customized file from what's in the workshop, simply because this template will allow me to SSH to my EC2 instances, which I vastly prefer. If you need the modified form of this template, Michael will post the link to the modified template, and feel free to use that instead of what's in the workshop instructions. That's the only variation. It just allows you to feed in a PEM key, a key pair, so that you can come in with your own PEM key and SSH to the EC2 instance, since we need to log on to clients and so forth. That's the on-premises template. I'm going to give it a stack name. Give it a name that makes sense, like on-premises stack. And what is CloudFormation? It's basically our automation service, infrastructure as a service, allows you to deploy large stacks of resources in AWS in a repeatable manner. So it's really quite useful. I have a key pair that's created, that's ready to go, so I'll go with that. And I'm going to pretty much take defaults for everything else. I don't really care about any of the other options in CloudFormation, other than I do need to acknowledge that the template might create IAM resources such as roles and policies and so on. So I have to acknowledge that before it'll allow me to create the stack. I'm going to let that run. And for my other in-cloud region resources, I'm just going to go with the default. So let me actually go to module 1 and deploy the in-cloud region. And I'm going to do that in Oregon, US West 2. Okay, Oregon. In cloud. With a name like Data Migration Workshop, in cloud resources, a little longer than my original name for the other. That's fine. No parameters. Knowledge. Get stuck. Okay. And
So Ganesh, is this the time we can bring up one of the questions?
sure, because I do want to make sure my servers come up before I go away. So go ahead.
Excellent. So the first thing is just, can you speak to, from this workshop, what the cost will be?
And that's definitely a valid question, given that we're not supplying the infrastructure while we're offering the workshop for free. You're bringing, the attendees are bringing their own accounts, and naturally there's a cost concern. From what I have observed and tested, the resources that are deployed as part of this workshop, if you leave them up and running for up to 3 hours and share it with all your friends and so on, should cost you no more than 3 hours. And you can be really sure that you're no longer spending money on infrastructure that's lying around after the workshop's over and your learning's complete by simply going and doing a delete stack at the end of this workshop in each of the two regions. If you go to the instructions in module 5 of this workshop in the GitHub, it walks you step by step through what are all the steps you need to do before you go and delete the CloudFormation templates, or CloudFormation stacks, so that delete stack will actually succeed. So as long as you follow those steps very carefully, under $3. Hopefully that addresses your question.
Thank you, Ganesh. That does.
And looks like our resources are deploying. So while this is going on, and the other one's probably done as well by now. Usually the in-cloud one should be done right away. There we go, create complete. So while this is going on, and this will take a little bit of time, why don't we go ahead and learn a little bit about DataSync, actually look at its features, because the next step is going to be deploying DataSync to perform a migration from our on-premises NAS. So what is DataSync? The problem that AWS DataSync helps you solve is a very common problem. Customers want to migrate more and more workloads to the cloud. These data sets keep getting larger as well. They keep getting bigger. In fact, most of our customers are reporting non-linear growth in their data footprint, especially for unstructured data. So there's a need for tools to help move the data quickly and efficiently. Now, transferring a few files here and there is pretty easy to do. But when you start looking at copying large amounts of data, there are a few things to think about. Many customers initially go for do-it-yourself solutions, which makes a lot of sense because these tools are free. You can also build tools to do this on your own, but that takes work and it takes time. So your free tools can actually end up costing you a lot of money and time. When you try to do a large-scale migration with them, it can cost you a ton of money. You may need to be very careful about how you use your network bandwidth too, and ration it to different migration tasks that are running in parallel. You also don't want to find out that the files that took you hours or days to transfer didn't make it intact. The copies are corrupt or suspect. How do you do your integrity checking and get a detailed log of every file that actually transferred, if that's what you need? All of this is what we call undifferentiated heavy lifting for migration, and that's exactly what DataSync is good at. DataSync is a service that we offer that makes it easy to move large volumes of data. It's designed for high-speed online data transfer between your data centers and the cloud. It can automatically handle many of the chores that are part of your migration. And that includes scripting the copy jobs, scheduling the jobs, monitoring them, validating the data, and optimizing network utilization. Today, we have customers who are routinely using DataSync to transfer data volumes on the scale of tens or even hundreds of terabytes every single day. DataSync is particularly efficient when you have large numbers of small files. It can deliver multiples of the migration speeds you typically get from open source tools, especially when you're dealing with these large number of small file scenarios. And you pay only for the data you move. We just announced an over 60% price reduction last November for DataSync, when our retail price dropped to 1.25 cents per gig of data transferred. Now, this is really cost effective when you compare it to third-party offerings on the market today, which offer similar features. To migrate out of your data center with DataSync, you're going to need a DataSync agent. This is a virtual machine. We supply the VM image on all the common hypervisors, whether it's VMware or Hyper-V or KVM. We have an EC2 flavor too, which is what we'll be using in today's virtual workshop. You then need to configure your NAS systems to present an NFS or SMB share or access to the DataSync agent. And after bringing up the agent, you configure it and manage it and perform all of the migration-related activities from the management console. And you can use the CLI and SDK, of course, if that's what you prefer. The agent can perform transfers either over the internet or it can transfer over Direct Connect or VPN. That's your choice. Today, the supported targets in AWS or Amazon S3. They can be Amazon EFS, which is our managed NFS in the cloud. It can be FSX for Windows File Server. That's our managed file service built on Windows Server. And data in flight is always encrypted using TLS. DataSync also gives you the option of encryption for data at rest in any of the supported AWS storage targets. And the best part of it is it's bidirectional. There's a reason why we have that symbol for DataSync. Should you decide you want the latest data back out from any of these cloud targets into your NAS system, it's very easy to set up a task to simply copy it back out. And it gives you options for validating your copied data, logging the details of every transfer task. We'll explore all this in more detail as we go through the rest of this. What are some common use cases? First, migration of active data. Simply getting hard data from your on-premises environment to the cloud, and doing that in a way that it can be incremental. Second, moving data to the cloud for processing by cloud-native applications. So today we have customers running media workflows. We have customers running autonomous vehicles generating data that need to be processed in the cloud. We have oil and gas companies generating seismic data. We have healthcare companies generating genome sequences. And this stuff requires scalable and elastic compute to process. Customers naturally want to do that compute in the cloud, but in order for this compute to work, first it needs the data to land in some repository near it, like maybe S3. And then that's really where DataSync comes in. The third use case is exactly what we're doing today, taking data off of high-value Tier 1 systems on premises, moving it to lower-cost storage in the cloud, and maybe presenting it back via lower-cost means, via hybrid cloud storage. So that's something we'll be looking at today. A fourth use case is something a lot of our customers do, data protection and DR. This is for our customers looking to replicate their on-premises production data to the cloud. If their RTO can support that, this replication can be to really low-cost storage tiers, like maybe Glacier Deep Archive. They can take advantage of that really low cost of storage, which could be as little as $1 a terabyte per month, while still being able to get the data back if they ever have a problem. So before we cut over to the demo and show DataSync in action, let's talk a little bit about Cox Automotive, one of our customers who benefited from the exact same use case we're demonstrating today. Now, if you've ever gone through the process of buying or selling a car in North America, chances are you've touched at least one or possibly more of Cox Automotive's applications somewhere along the way. They own many of the major brands that are familiar to you in the US, Kelley Blue Book, Auto Trader, Dealer.com. They provide applications, services to more than 40,000 dealerships. When it comes to buying and selling cars, they're a really big name in North America. And they were dealing with this problem of growing NAS footprint on premises. The cost kept going up. It was difficult to manage. So what they did was they used DataSync to move data to S3, and they used Storage Gateway to present the data back out to their on-premises applications. And landing the data in S3 allowed them to take advantage of S3 features like cross-region replication. And this allowed them to present the data out in multiple regions via file gateways in separate data centers. And they were able to save 85% on storage costs, and perhaps more importantly, free up the storage engineers for things that weren't undifferentiated heavy lifting. That's really what a lot of this is about. So with that, let me pause and switch to workshop mode, make sure I've actually got working stacks, look like I have. And when your stacks come up, the very first thing you want to do for both your on-premises stack and the in-cloud stack is go and grab the outputs and save them. I'm doing that right now. Save that to a text file somewhere. We're going to need it during the workshop. What we have here is things like IP addresses, names of S3 buckets, and so on. And when we go and configure DataSync and Storage Gateway, we're going to need the outputs for this. Again, your information is going to be different in your environment. If you're following along with me, don't use my values, use whatever values that you have. Okay, I got my information. I'm now ready to go and see what actually got deployed on premises. So let me go to EC2 because most of the stuff that got deployed on premises in this region in Ohio was EC2. There's a couple other things that got done here. I'm going to go look at my running instances. And what do we have here? I have my NAS client, that's my application server. I have an NFS server. This is what I'm migrating out of. And I have a couple of virtual machines, EC2 instances in my case. One I will need in order to deploy DataSync for the migration. Another is a file gateway agent for presenting hybrid cloud storage back out to this application server. We're not going to need them right away. We're going to need them in subsequent steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is SSH to this machine, the application server, and have a look around, see if I can maybe mount this NFS server and see what files are on it, perhaps. I'm going to hit connect on it. Use SSH in my case. The instructions will tell you to use Session Manager. That works fine too. About the only gripe I have with that is, like I said, copy paste doesn't work too well. But other than that, the instructions work fine. Go ahead and use that too. That's what works for it. I'm going to go ahead and SSH. And right after I come up, I will take a look around, see what's there for mounted file systems. Looks like all I have is my boot drive. So let me go ahead and mount my file system. And in order to do that, I will need a mount point and I will need the IP address of my NFS file server. And where did that come from? That came from one of the outputs. There's a output in a CloudFormation template for on-premises called NFS server private IP. I'm using that. And the mount point is /media data. The instructions will tell you that. And I have a mount point already created /mnt data. So I'm going to sudo that. There we go. And at this point, I have my NFS server mounted. What I'm also going to do is take a look around and see what data is in there. So in my NFS, I have a subdirectory called images owned by root. And in images, I have a very large number of JPEG images, about 200 to be precise. They're all dated about January 2017. Looks like no one's really touched it. Pretty typical, large unstructured file shares, all owned by root, right? Kind of boring. So I'm going to do something a little different than what's in the workshop, change things up a bit. I'm going to change the ownership on one of the files. Because one of the things I want to check after a migration and a present back is everything coming back the way it was. Is my file metadata being preserved, right? So I changed the ownership on one of my files. Maybe I touched that file as well. Right? There we go. And okay, I'm going to go back and do an ls minus lr and see what happens. So ownership change, date change on one of the files, everything else is still the same. So that's going to give me an idea of what's going on when it comes back. And because it's EC2 user group, I want to know what the UID and GID for that is. So I'm going to just check what that is in my etc password. EC2 user is UID 1000, GID 1000. Okay, so that's something I'm just going to keep in mind. And that pretty much completes all of the work I have to do in module 1, just deploy and essentially verify that everything's okay and maybe mess with the file system a bit before I migrate it, just to make sure it comes back the way I want it. Okay. Next step is going to be deploying CloudFormation. Deploying DataSync. Go ahead and do that. And where will we do that? We will do that in the region where we have our target S3 bucket created. Now, if you look at the output of my CloudFormation stack in the in-cloud region, one of the outputs is the name of a bucket, an S3 bucket. And we want to deploy our resources here. Our DataSync agent needs to be registered here so that it can talk to this bucket. So we're in Oregon, and we're going to go ahead and start the DataSync service console. And if you notice, there's a facility here to deploy the agent from right here. You could get the OVA from right here if you have any of these hypervisors. I'm going to say, since my agent is running EC2, I'll pick EC2. You have a choice of public or private endpoints. You're going through Direct Connect or VPN. You would pick a private endpoint. You also have PIPs as an option. Keep that in mind. And here, I'm going to have to feed in a IP address for my agent. Presents an activation key, say my agent PM in Ohio, because that's where the actual machine is. And I say create agent. There's the screen. Okay. Get out of getting started would help. There we go. And that's our agent. And it's online. It's up and running. So the next step is you would pretty much go ahead and tell it what to get data out of and put data into. This is creating locations. And notice the choices you have here. I'm going to go with NFS initially because that's what I'm getting data out of. But look at the choices. You can go with any of these Amazon managed file stores. You can go with on-premises SMB. You can even have, if you have on-premises object storage that's S3 compatible, let's say you have CleverSafe, you have EMC ECS, any of those S3 compatible data stores, you could get data out of them using DataSync today. And that's something we added fairly recently. I'm going to go with NFS. I'm going to select the public agent that I have there, fully configured. For NFS server, go with the IP address, private IP address of my NFS server that came from the CloudFormation output. And this is just something you should know. It's what was exported out of the NFS data as an export point. It's /media/data. Go ahead and create location. Okay, there we go. And I would go ahead and create a second location, which is S3, which is where my data goes. The bucket name that's required. It is whatever bucket is that starts with data migration workshop. You might want to validate the name against whatever the CloudFormation template produced as an output. 08A is the ending, matches. You can pick any class, which is great for those deep archival use cases. You could go to one of these. We're not doing that today. We're doing S3 standard. But notice all the S3 tiers are supported for migration. For IAM role, again, this comes from your CloudFormation output. It's a role that begins data migration workshop. And make sure the string at the end matches. In my case, it's A and Z. Works. This is again created by the CloudFormation template. You could actually auto-generate if that's what you want to do, but in this case, you don't need to. It is already pre-created for you by the template. And I'm going to go ahead and create the location. Okay, so I got locations going, and the next step is to perform a task. The task is how you get data from one place to another, either one time or recurrently, as we'll see. And since we got two places, we have enough to perform a migration from one to the other. So I'm going to say choose an existing location on my NFS, to my S3 bucket, existing S3, and I'm going to say NFS to S3 for a name. Look at all the options. This is worth exploring. So you have a number of options given for verification. You could even choose to have all of the data checked after it lands to make sure that bit for bit, whatever's in the source matches whatever's in the target. I'm going to go with the default, which is verify only the data transferred. We definitely want file metadata copied over. That was the point of going and messing with file ownerships and dates and so on. We want to be sure our POSIX permissions came through. This is a bunch of interesting options. If you wanted a clean copy of the source in the target and you want deleted files to be automatically deleted in your S3 target, you would actually uncheck this. The same for this, right? But then if you had an accidental delete in your source file system, you would lose your copy in S3 as well. So I'm going to go ahead and keep these, keep the defaults, but just be aware that you control this, right? Similarly, bandwidth. By default, it takes all the bandwidth it can get for the task, but you can throttle it. So this is where it gets useful because you might have 5 tasks running and you might want to give each one of them a different quality of service, right? So you control that. And you can, if you have multiple agents, or if you have a single agent and you have multiple tasks, you definitely want to enable queuing so that each one can stand behind the other and get the services of that agent. So I'm going to keep that checked. There's include and exclude patterns. You don't necessarily have to migrate all the data. You can choose to say anything with a star.tmp extension is not going through, or only things in a subdirectory called /important are going through. Nothing else is going through, right? So include and exclude rules, similar to regex. You can set schedules, which could just be, hourly, as short as hourly. We have customers today doing data sync across regions for their FSx for Windows file systems with hourly syncs, right? And then that's how they do their DR. And then it's completely incremental and very efficient. Or you can do custom, you can do cron jobs, right? Or cron-like syntax. I'm not going to do any of this. I'm going to do a one-time migration, but just be aware these options exist. You can do logging, and logging it gets pretty detailed. You can do basic logging, which you'll get right off the console, and you also get off CloudWatch metrics. You can audit. You can say, I need to know when each file lands in S3 with timestamps. And I need integrity checks on everything. So you could do that. I'm not going to actually ask for this since it takes a little bit longer, and I don't want that right now, but you could actually do that. And you could customize the log group as well. Now, DataSync has excellent integration with CloudWatch in general. Like I said, CloudWatch metrics, CloudWatch log. It even has integration with CloudWatch events. So if you, for example, want to set up a workflow where your task ends in the cloud and you want that to trigger a Lambda function in the cloud that goes and does something with whatever's in S3, you can do that. So I'm not going to do any of that right now. I'm just going to do a simple migration. So let's go ahead and take that. Didn't like something. Oh, it didn't like bandwidth limit. Go and edit that. That's what I did wrong. I set a bandwidth limit and set it to 0. It didn't like that. Good now. And at this point, all that's happened is the task got created. Didn't actually start a migration. This is kind of easy to miss the first time you do this. And then refresh the screen. Make sure it actually created. There we go. It's available. It's not running. What you need to do is pick the task and actually hit start. That's what makes it go. And at this point, it will represent all your options. So you get a chance to make last minute changes. If you don't like something here, you can change it for this particular execution, including filtering criteria. And I'm going to go ahead and hit start. And that starts my migration. So it's going to launch and it's going to report statistics on the screen, metrics while it's running. While that's running, let me pause here and ask what questions have been coming through, Michael, and anything I should be responding to live that you keep hearing a lot or your audience has been asking about?
Sure, Ganesh. So I have one question here, and this is a new question. Is there any cost associated with keeping a data sync agent and connection up and running if there's no file transfers happening? Should I be shutting down my agents when they're not being used?
Valid concern. We're always worried about cost when we're using these managed services. With DataSync, the pricing model is very simple. You pay for what you transfer. It is 1.25 cents a gig flat, whether ingress or egress doesn't matter, and that's all you pay for, right? Now, of course, in our infrastructure, we do have the agent running on premises, and it's an EC2 instance, and that might be burning a modest amount of money. But that's exactly why we shut down the workshop after a couple of hours after we're done, so that we don't burn that money. In your on-premises environment, it's probably running on VMware, not that it doesn't have a cost associated with it. It does. There's a TCO associated with it, but it's sunk money. Basically, you've already spent money on your ESX server. It's a virtual machine sitting on top of that. So you don't pay for your extra for your on-premises compute. You are consuming those resources. So hopefully that addresses your question.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Another question we have here, if I'm looking to move data to the cloud from numerous NAS appliances or from numerous shares, how can I scale DataSync for that workload?
Okay, and then that's a very common problem we see. It's like what we have here is a toy. Like we have one NAS appliance with a tiny number of files, a couple of hundred, and being migrated to S3. Well, I don't need a fancy service for this. But what if I had 5 arrays and we were talking hundreds of terabytes of data? Well, here's how it works. For each one of the shares that are presented on premises, whether it be NFS or SMB, and DataSync can handle either one, for each one of those, you're going to need one of these locations, right? So just have a mental map of this. You're going to need one location for each source NAS system. You're going to need a target for that. Nothing says they can't all land in the same S3 bucket as long as they're landing on different prefixes or folders within the S3 bucket. You could certainly do that. However, for each one of these migrations to happen, you're going to need one task for each source and each destination pair, right? If you pick a source destination pair, you're going to need one task. Now, what this means is if you're migrating out of 5 NAS appliances, you're going to need a minimum of 5 tasks. And the way DataSync works is that when you look at agents, you can have multiple agents, but a given agent can only be running one task at a time, right? This is why when I went and defined my task, I said queue if the agent is not available. Now, what if I don't like the idea of queuing? Well, can I set up multiple agents? Yeah, sure, you can. And they can run in parallel. And at the task level, you could throttle what bandwidth each task can get. And that way you can have multiple migrations happening in parallel. Another reason to have multiple agents would be you not only want to use the public endpoint through your internet connection, you also want to set up another agent that goes over your separate private direct connect link. And you want to control which migrations happen over which wires, right? Maybe you have really sensitive data that needs to fly over the private wire. So, and then that way you can control it. So hopefully that addresses your question, Michael.
I think we're ready to continue there.
Okay. So that's pretty much the task that was completed. And what I'm going to do at this point is point out that the execution was done. If you go to the history, you will see task execution is done. Again, good integration with CloudWatch. You can see these same metrics that you see here right off the CloudWatch metrics output as well. This data that's collected and presented at a prescribed granularity for all of the throughput and file throughput metrics. You can also get detailed logging from CloudWatch logs, as I mentioned. What I'm going to do is go to S3 and see what actually landed there, right? And again, this is part of module 2. You're following along. I'm in my in-cloud region. I've completed my data first migration task, and I want to go and see what landed in S3. And the bucket name is Data Migration Workshop. And you'll see a file here called .aws DataSync metadata. This is a housekeeping file that DataSync puts there. It's not your user data, so it shouldn't concern you too much in a migration scenario. Just note that it came there from DataSync, from the agent. The images folder came through. Folder structures are preserved. All my files came through as objects. But look at the timestamp on them. The timestamp is today's timestamp. So what happened to my file timestamps, M times, A times? What happened to my file ownerships? What happened to all of that? I know that this is the file I messed with and changed its ownership and changed its date. So I'm going to go inside this object and take a look at it. So it says it was modified October 7th. That was just now, 11:49. Not liking that. So let's go look at its properties. You see the 7 metadata fields for the object. If you go inside the metadata, you will actually see this metadata tags for this object that preserve its, that capture its UID, GID, all of that. The M times and A times are captured as well. There's a field that says the migration happened with the DataSync process, file permissions. These are POSIX permissions. So all of that gets captured. Now, why this is useful to know is when we bring up file gateway subsequently, it actually looks at this metadata and it uses it to when presenting the data back out, the object back out of the file system. This is how we make sure that your migration is completely seamless and you don't lose any metadata when you're doing NFS migrations with DataSync. Something to point out. So that pretty much completes the module 2 portion of this workshop. I'll do a quick time check, 11:56. Let me go ahead and do a brief run through of the storage gateway service at this point. Look at its features so that you have some idea of what exactly we'll be doing next in this demo, and we have some idea of what features Storage Gateway offers that we're going to be testing next. So what is Storage Gateway and what problem is it trying to solve? So Storage Gateway is a service we offer to address the need for hybrid cloud storage. Now, there are many workloads today that enterprises have that can be moved to the cloud or are very difficult to move. They may need to stay on premises for a variety of reasons, whether it's performance or compliance, or they may simply have too many moving parts, dependencies that make it incredibly hard to lift and shift. Some of them, in fact, need to stay on premises indefinitely. That's what we hear from some of our customers. We have customers today doing genome sequencing, media rendering, medical imaging, seismic manufacturing. They run these workloads that just cannot move for whatever reasons they might be. Now, what hybrid cloud storage offers you is a way for these on-premises applications to take advantage of that low cost and durable storage that's sitting in the cloud using conventional protocols, as we'll see. So how does Storage Gateway work? It's a service that addresses the hybrid cloud storage problem. If you want to use Storage Gateway in your data center, you will first need to install an agent in your data center. And the agent is typically a virtual machine. And as it says here, we offer the agent for VMware, for Hyper-V, for KVM, and of course for EC2. But what's this? Starting a while back, we've actually made the gateway available to our customers as a hardware appliance, and starting very recently, you can order that appliance right off the console, and it'll be shipped to you. It comes pre-installed and pre-configured with the agent software. You just bring it up in your data center and it's ready to go. And the agent is the component that's responsible for presenting your on-premises host with storage via your choice of storage protocols, whether it be file storage, that's NFS or SMB, block storage, that's via iSCSI, or it can even present a virtual tape library via iSCSI for your backup software. This agent communicates with our service endpoint via either the internet or direct connect or VPN. Again, entirely your choice how you bring it up. It's designed for efficient data transfer, so we pay a lot of attention to, we don't want to be hogging this wire when we make small incremental changes to data here. All in-flight traffic between the agent and the cloud is encrypted, and data at rest encryption is supported as well. And to make sure your on-premises applications get low latency access, the agent is also configured with a disk cache. And this disk cache will allow it to buffer the hot data locally so that you get a large number of cache hits. For most of your data, your application servers are going to the local disk, and when there's a cache miss, the data can be efficiently brought from the back. I mentioned a variety of protocols that Storage Gateway can use. There's basically three flavors of the Storage Gateway. The first flavor is the File Gateway, which is what we'll be testing today. File Gateway presents a file interface. It stores your files as objects, and this object sitting in S3. It allows your on-premises host to use NFS or SMB to access your S3 data via the gateway. And then that's, as I mentioned, the flavor we'll be testing today. The second flavor is Volume Gateway, also very popular. This presents block storage volumes via iSCSI. Data written to these volumes can be asynchronously backed up as point-in-time snapshots. Essentially, they are stored as Amazon EBS snapshots in the back. The service comes with its own native snapshot scheduler. You can also use the new AWS backup service to make these snapshots. And this gives you a really good way to take your on-premises hosts and sail them over to EC2 instances in the cloud whenever you want it, because there's always a reasonably current EBS snapshot sitting in the cloud representing their boot and data volumes. And then there's Tape Gateway. Tape Gateway is great because what it can do for you is give you a virtual tape library that can stand in for your physical tape library. And that virtual tape library, which consists of a media changer and several tape drives, virtual of course, is completely compatible with any of the standard backup applications you may be using today. So if you're using NetBackup, you're using Commvault, you're using Veeam, using IBM Spectrum, any of that, you get to keep all your existing backup scripts, keep your workflows. All you do is drop replace your physical tape infrastructure with the virtual tape library, and you're done. And instead of writing to tapes, your backup software now starts writing to virtual tapes in S3. You can take advantage of low-cost S3 tiers such as Glacier, Glacier Depart. So gives you a rough picture of what storage gateway is. So with this, let's go ahead and uh, see what bringing one up looks like. Let's see. So I'm in my in-cloud region. I think I am. Let me make sure. DataSync here. And we know that that's the right region to be in. It's the region in which I want to have DataSync running. I want to go ahead and bring up Storage Gateway. It's under storage. Get started. And the default is file gateway that's presented. Remember, you get a one shot to do this. You can go back, right? You want to make sure you pick file gateway and not one of the other flavors. Once an agent is configured a certain flavor, it can be reconfigured to any other flavor. I'm picking file gateway because I want NAS. I don't want VMware right now. I want EC2, but make note of the choices available. Hardware appliance is a choice as well. I'm going to go EC2. It's already been launched in my case. Endpoint type is public, but I could go with one of the others. And IP address. Again, this is a CloudFormation template. Output, you need to know what your stack produced. Use yours. And I've configured the gateway. Notice it gives you the choice of configuring a CloudWatch log group. So it can periodically write information about the health of the gateway. I could go ahead and do this. I'm not going to do this in the interest of time. Again, excellent integration with CloudWatch metrics, logging, as well as events. In particular, Gateway incorporates a couple of new events of particular interest. File Gateway can notify you when a file is written to the NAS share and has actually made it to the S3 bucket in the back. It's a feature that many of our customers have been asking for a long time, so that's something that we just came up with. Another event that we actually report on today is the refresh cache completion, and that's something I'll be talking about after we bring up the gateway. But be aware that there's been a lot of advancements relative to CloudWatch integrations recently. It's worth looking at. So now that the gateway is up and running, what I'm going to do is go ahead and make a file share so that I can present data back out. And what I have to do is provide the name of a bucket. Okay. All right. Seems to be okay. Oh, need to allocate storage. And looks like I missed a step. That will explain why I wasn't able to create the share. The local disks on the gateway need to be configured and allocated for cache or for other purposes depending on the type of gateway it is. Feed in the same bucket name as what you had for your data sync. You could give it a folder name if needed. I don't want a really long mount point, so I'm going to just say, give me that, NFS. And this is using this gateway. Notice this feature. You can set a automated cache refresh. What is this about? This is a great new feature that allows you to ensure that your local NAS share that's presented is in sync with whatever is in S3 in the back. So imagine a data lake scenario where you're constantly ingesting new data into S3 from multiple sources. You could actually have the file gateway automatically go and pick up new data from the S3 bucket and be in sync with it with a lag of no more than 5 minutes, right? And then this is a set it and forget it kind of thing. So very useful in those data distribution scenarios. I'm not going to actually select that, but we'll actually see if time permits, if we can see what a cache refresh looks like and what it does for us. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. The defaults for the IAM roles, S3 standard, what is recommended for typical use cases. You could consider other tiers depending on what your usage pattern is like. Default encryption, although you could go again, customer supplied KMS key. This I might want to change. I may not want all clients to connect. I might only want my specific NFS client to connect. So in my case, my application server has this IP. It's again from your CloudFormation output. Okay. You probably want to change this as well. So we want to close this. No-root squash will ensure that if somebody comes in as root, their identity is preserved as root. You do want to export as read-write if you want your clients to be able to write to S3 as well as read from S3. Read-only is an option for distribution scenarios where you have multiple readers, maybe multiple gateways and multiple data centers reading off a single bucket. That's a very common use case. And this just tells you what is being used for file permissions if there's objects put into the S3 bucket without any metadata fields in them, UID, GID, or file permissions. It basically gets presented as an NFS nobody user with these default permissions. So I'm going to go ahead and create the file share. And the file share has been created. And if you look at the file share and check on it, one of the most useful things you get out of this is actual commands for how to mount it. Right? It'll be very useful. And notice the clients that are supported. You can mount the storage gateway NFS share from Windows OS and from Mac OS as well. And there's commands given for that. Very useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my NFS client and see if I can mount this file gateway as part of my migration. But before I can do that, I will first need a mount point. I made my mount point called /mntfgv0 fgw. And this again, I would need to sudo. Where did that command come from? It came from the console for the particular share. I just copy pasted it. And there you go. So it's mounted. So at this point, if you simply want to know what's different between my original NFS and my new file gateway, this command will do that for me, diff-qr. It tells you what's in one share but not in the other. So here you see in file gateway there's a .aws DataSync metadata. We know about that file. We're fine with that, but let's see if anything else is different. And also, why is it taking a bit of time? Because it actually has to go and fetch metadata to the local cache from the file gateway. This is a one-time thing. If you simply rerun the command, it's going to be instantaneous, right? So we pretty much know at this point that what we presented from the original NFS is what made it over. And I want to be really sure by doing one more thing. I want to actually go and see exactly what files are in my file gateway. Images directory came back. The object metadata, the file metadata came back with permissions, dates, all of that. The rest of them are root, right? So that object metadata really helped. So that pretty much completes module 3. Now let me pause at this point and ask you, Michael, have any questions come in on Gateway that we can address at this point?
Sure, Ganesh. So there's a number of questions out there. Why don't I start with this first one? If I have hot data that needs to be resident, local to where the file gateway sits, the file gateway agent sits, what can I do about that? Can I use a cache, and can I configure that cache? And related to that question, if you can just reiterate, there were some questions about the storage used with that agent. Can you reiterate a little bit of where that agent is actually sitting?
Okay, that's a couple of different questions. So the agent, let's actually, this is actually worth revisiting in the picture. So let me actually go back to the picture if I can find it. The agent, the file gateway agent is sitting in your data center, right? So it's a virtual machine. Now, typically, you would not be configuring an S3 bucket in a different region to be backing your file system. In most real scenarios, you would be deploying this stack and this stack in the same region, right? But just remember, the agent itself is going to sit close to your application servers, the clients, because it has to service NFS or SMB to them. And in terms of cache, you would need to give it adequate high-speed cache, typically NVMe disks, to hold enough data to accommodate the working set size. So a very common scenario that we see for customers is they have petabytes and petabytes of data in a file share, and maybe 10 terabytes of that is very hard. And they would know. Storage admins would typically know what percentage of that data is hot. So you would use the working set size to size the cache. Now, one of the exciting new things that's happened with File Gateway is today we're supporting cache sizes as big as 64 terabytes, right? Which is awesome for people with those petabyte size data stores because 64 terabytes is a lot of data you can hold locally. And today, if you just go out there and shop for hardware, one U blade on which you can put KVM and get this file gateway on could probably hold enough NVMe storage to support 64 terabytes of local cache, even with RAID 5 protection, right? And remember, you don't have to be too concerned about the fault tolerance of this because within moments of a file being written here, it's going to get reflected in S3, and that's something that I plan to show in a second. So with that, let me move on and go over some of the use cases for File Gateway. What are the use cases? So what we just saw was shifting on-premises storage to cloud-backed file shares. That's what we just saw, right? Very classic use case, get your data off of tier 1 into the cloud, presented back via low-cost means. Very common. But the first one is actually something I'm seeing more and more of myself among my customers. I have customers doing Veeam backups. I have customers doing SQL Server native backups. I have customers doing Oracle RMAN. And then typically they're writing to things like data domain. And then they're trying to get that data domain off their data center because of the spiraling costs. They can't deal with that. File Gateway is a perfect drop-in for situations like that, especially when you pair that with S3 tiering. Because what you could do is you could just have your backups go to S3 standard by default, and then on the S3 end, you can set up a lifecycle policy that ages it out over time, right? So you always have access to your most recent backups. We have customers doing number 3 as well very frequently these days. All of our life sciences or anybody doing a lot of machine learning or any kind of massive compute, both on-premises and in the cloud, they're doing this. They're populating their central data lake and using it to pump data into file gateways all over the planet where they have on-premises applications, right? Very common use cases. A couple of quick use cases, customer case studies, BMS, Bristol Myers Squibb, major global pharma, a company we're fond of talking about when it comes to File Gateway. Their use cases, they have a very, very large number of on-premises applications, essentially dealing with instrumentation data. They need to write the data to a central data lake for processing. And the problem is because these on-premises applications are proprietary software, they can't simply be refactored to write directly to S3. So they use standard file protocols to write to file gateways. Bristol Myers actually uses, of late, they've been using a lot of the hardware appliances for storage gateway. In fact, they had a talk out at reInvent last year for how the hardware appliance has been helping them. And the key benefits for them is no need to refactor the on-premises applications, lower cost, lower latency, and then just a more flexible and usable solution. Another quick shout out to another customer of ours using a different flavor of gateway, Ryanair, using Tape Gateway, a really major airline in Europe. And their problem was extremely simple. They were doing on-premises backup to tape, and they actually showed us data that suggested that 4 out of every 10 restore operations from tape were failing. And that was the number one pain point. I mean, forget the other problem of, you were spending too much on tape, you are spending money to store tape offsite. Those are real problems. But beyond that, not being able to recover data when you really need it, that's a real showstopper for a lot of companies. So simply drop replacing that physical tape library with our virtual tape library and eliminating tape was like a major winner for them. Not just about cost savings, not just about the lack of failures in future for restores, but also the migration was like extremely simple, less than 1 month to migrate and no longer paying for warehousing their tapes. So important use cases. What I'm going to do now is do a quick run through in the time available of a couple of things that you would see in modules 4 and 5 if time were not tight. What I'm going to do is the very first thing I'm going to do is add some data to my S3 bucket that's backing the file gateway and see if I can actually see it from my on-premises client. So let me actually do that. Right. Now this would normally in module 4 be done with DataSync. I don't want to take that long to do it. So let's just go ahead and put some data in manually. Let's pretend we're a data lake in there and add some stuff to it and see if we can see it off the file gateway. Right. So I'm just going to upload a file. Right. I'm going to go into images, let's say. And upload a file. What do I want to upload? Ingest into bucket from external source. How convenient. Let's do that. Okay. So we got the object in here. It's got that name. Might have to scroll a bit to see it. There we go. Probably doesn't have any metadata. We could check. One metadata item. Not sure what that is. Content type, image, PNG. Okay. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our NFS and do that exact same command. Can we see that file right now in the file gateway? We can, because it doesn't know the local metadata cache hasn't updated. How can we change that? Well, we could just wait and eventually it would refresh due to some operation or the other, or we could force the issue. We could go in here and we could go to Storage Gateway and we could go to the file share, select it, and one of the actions we can provide is refresh cache. That's an API operation. When you go to do that, it helpfully suggests you could configure it for automated refresh, which is something a lot of our customers are using, right? And the nice thing with this is it pretty much filters recursively down from wherever you applied the refresh to. It applies to all objects. So that's done. The refresh request was done. Let's go straight to our share and see if it came through. And it did. So it came back, and notice how it came back with those defaults, NFS nobody, and these were the default permissions we configured in the storage gateway. Obviously, this is something you can influence by messing with the metadata when you populate it in the storage gateway. Any questions, Michael, since time is short?
I think we have one other good question here, and this is talking about SMB with the file gateway. If I want to present SMB file shares gateway, will the file gateway let me use Microsoft Windows ACLs on files?
Okay, and that comes up quite a lot too. By default, file gateway uses POSIX permissions. Right now, you can always change that. There's a setting on the file share when you go and create a SMB file share. Remember how when you create the file share, you can go in and say, do I want NFS or SMB? On SMB, you can actually go in and say, I actually want to use Windows ACLs. I want to enable it for that. And when you do that, it can support up to 10 dynamic ACLs on the share. That's for security, for people to come in as users and groups to access. We don't support security ACLs today, the SACL audit logging. However, File Gateway has introduced its own audit logging feature. You can see audit logs for all accesses right off of CloudWatch logs. So hopefully that addresses the use case for most customers who need that level of security and logging. All right. So with that, since time is short, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the rest of this. And for those of you following along, thank you very much for your time today. What are the key takeaways today? When you have a need for large online migrations, keep DataSync in mind. It's great for getting your data off of NFS, SMB, any S3 compatible object stores you might have on premises. The second problem, when you have on-premises hosts that need access to that conventional storage, whether it's block, file, or tape, consider Storage Gateway. It's going to help you without adding any more on-premises storage footprint. That's the key. Also keep our storage services portfolio in mind. We have many, many services here in AWS. The portfolio is growing rapidly. The features are getting added by the day based on what customers ask us to do. So do keep tabs on us and keep an eye on what we have to offer. Now, for those of you watching this live, this is the second of 6 workshops. Please do make sure to attend the other 4. One coming up this Friday, Sudhakar will be doing that on EBS snapshots. Next week we have one on Windows, FSX for Windows file storage. We have one on S3 security, always popular. Avi will be doing one on AWS backup with the new cross-account features. This is really new content, and you definitely want to practice some of this stuff. And if you're watching this in recorded form, look for these recordings of other modules. Definitely visit our training and search site. We have, as of today, October 2020, more than 45 free digital classes that deal only with storage. We also offer in-classroom training as well. And your feedback. We would love to hear from you today. We are always trying to make these sessions better. That's my email up there, ganson@amazon.com. That's Michael's email as well. It was a pleasure delivering this to you. I'm always excited talking about our storage portfolio and our services. You see me at any of these events, come by and say hello. Don't be a stranger. I'd love to connect with you and see what you're doing for enterprise storage. And thank you today.